Silence is where our most brilliant ideas come from, but it can also feel uncomfortable, especially when we're expecting someone to speak. We're not used to long stretches of silence anymore. All sorts of reactions can come up: confusion, curiosity, boredom, maybe impatience. And noticing how we react to silence gives us a clue about how we react to uncertainty. Silence is a microcosm of uncertainty. But what is uncertainty? There are many definitions. One from cognitive science is it's the gap between what we expect to happen and what actually happens. Why does this happen? Because according to cognitive science research, our brain isn't just passively taking in information, it's actively predicting what information it's going to receive. And then it compares that to what it actually receives. That gap is what's called, in this case, uncertainty. Now, a little bit of uncertainty is what makes life interesting, right? It's what makes us have surprise. It's how we learn, how we improve. But a lot of uncertainty all the time, it's a bit stressful, right? So what can we do? According to this cognitive science model that's called predictive processing, we can do two things. One is to change how we look at the situation, and the other is to change what we do about the situation. So we're updating how we're making sense of the uncertainty, the gap between what we're expecting and what happens, or we change what we do. And I believe it's a combination of both. That's how we navigate uncertainty, create the tomorrow we want when uncertainty is happening today. Now, I know talking about uncertainty can feel a bit abstract, so I want to talk about something else for a moment, which is love. Love for the NHS. A lot of people love the NHS, love the work they're doing for the NHS, like you. But also the NHS as a kind of social love, an expression of a kind of social love. The NHS was my first love, by the way, straight out of university and into the arms of the hospital wards. I even lived in the hospital over there at Guy's while I was a senior house officer a long time ago. And I looked at the rankings of the largest employers in the world. As you may know, the NHS is one of the largest employers in the world. And currently, according to a data company called Statista, it's number 7. And I was struck by the other organizations on that list. Would you like to take a guess? Maybe as to which one is number 1? Which is the largest organization in the world? Oh, close. I mean, I'm sure the rankings differ, but in this list, according to Statista, it's the Indian Defense Ministry at 3 million, nearly 3 million employees. Next, we have the US Department of Defense, also known as the Department of War. This is the time to boo if you want. Third, we have the Chinese People's Liberation Army. Fourth and fifth, respectively, are Walmart and Amazon. Number 6, China National Petroleum. So what struck me, and then the NHS comes in at 7 with about 1.5 million employees. So what struck me about the list is that all the other organizations larger than the NHS are either military, commercial, or fossil fuel. The NHS is the only organization there that's explicitly devoted to care, to preserving life, protecting life. The NHS has achieved something extraordinary, which is to create organized care at scale, a scale that's never been seen before in history. So in case you haven't appreciated yourselves today, I want to invite you to maybe pat yourselves on the back, put your hand on your heart and say, I done good. I'm all right as a human being. Now back to uncertainty. Economists tell us there are two types of uncertainty. And uncertainty is bad enough on its own, let alone when it affects something we love, the work we love. So according to economists, there are two types. One is measurable uncertainty. It's the probabilities we can calculate based on data. If you go for a job interview and there are 4 other candidates, you have a roughly 1 in 4 chance of getting that job. But there's true uncertainty, where the unknown unknowns are too many. It's impossible to predict what the outcome is, let alone the probability of the outcome. And leadership theorists since the 80s have told us we live in that world now. We live in the VUCA world that's volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, which basically just means no one knows what's going on. And so what does that mean in practice? It means that the organizational strategies we put in place last maybe a few years at the most. It means the linear careers where you enter an organization, climb the rungs, and retire are becoming increasingly rare. It means that the leadership styles that we used to rely on, authority-based leadership, expertise-based leadership, where we used to have the answers, we used to tell the juniors what to do, and they went off and did it, and everything was great. They don't work anymore. So what do? So using this idea that we can either change the way we make sense of the situation and then adapt what we do, I want to look at 2 pathways. We can't eliminate uncertainty, we can only change our relationship to it by changing how we look at it or what we do about it. So, 2 pathways to face uncertainty. One helps us create the future we want, and the other doesn't. The first pathway I call the pathway of learned anxiety, where we fight uncertainty, we resist change, or we pretend it's not happening. That leads us to act from a sense of fear and contraction. It leads us to become more rigid in our roles and our rules, to polarize, to separate me against them. And that results in a low-grade, continuous level of anxiety and disempowerment, where we're trying to control things, but at the back of my mind, we know it's not going to work. That pathway leads us to either overreact, overdo, overcompensate, keep busy, trying to control it all, micromanage. Or it leads us to sometimes disengage, give up, become cynical. What's the point? And both of those eventually lead to exhaustion, frustration, and burnout. Now, that pathway is understandable. We've all been there, I've been there. We've chosen that pathway because we felt we didn't have a choice. But I want to propose a second pathway for dealing with uncertainty. And that's the pathway that I'll call the liberating choice anxiety, liberating choice pathway. And that's about making friends with uncertainty, accepting it as normal. It's the new normal. And from there, we have a bit of space to start looking at our values, our purpose, and acting from there, choosing to respond from the values rather than from fear, habit, reaction. From there, we can amplify the sense of solidarity that the NHS is built on, choose mutual care. And that results in restoring trust. Trust in ourselves, trust in others, and trust in the process of change itself. So I want to dig in a little bit more into this pathway and the 3 liberating choices that make it up. And these ideas come from my own experience working with leaders these past 10 years, my own life experience, also research from multiple fields, also contemplative traditions, ancient wisdom that's always been around to manage uncertainty. Uncertainty isn't new. And applied leadership work as well in nonviolent communication, particularly the work of Miki Kashtan. So, the next 10 minutes, 3 liberating choices. Choice number 1, to create tomorrow when today is uncertain. Choosing to accept uncertainty without abandoning purpose. And an idea that's helped me here is the idea of the finite game versus the infinite game. We're always playing both games in life. The finite game is like football. It has a beginning, it has an end, there are rules, there's a goal, there are measurable metrics. We play to win, to achieve something. And then there's the infinite game, like sport. Sport doesn't have a beginning or an end, it's been around for as long as we know. It doesn't have specific rules, it has an orientation, a kind of bigger purpose. And the purpose is to keep playing. And it's for future generations to keep playing. And during times of uncertainty, we can get caught up in the finite game, trying to keep playing that particular game, when actually stepping back and remembering the infinite game, the actual purpose that we're here for, gives us a bit of room to make clear decisions, hard decisions. The NHS is a finite game. It started in 1948 and it will likely end sometime or be called something else. But what the NHS represents, which is organized care at scale in an extraordinary way, continues. That's what we're doing, right? Or we can choose to orient that way, and it gives us a bit of stability. That's what accepting the uncertainty starts to give us, a bit more room. My grandma once told me something when I was facing uncertainty in Algeria, where I grew up. There was a civil war looming in the 90s, and there was this low-grade anxiety that everybody felt. And she just said something in passing that stayed with me, which is, she just said casually, "Oh, you young people, you think nothing changes." And it was something simple, but it had me realize I had relied on certain things to stay the same. My friends, going to school, where I lived. But it wasn't going to be the case. And the way she said it had me feel that it was okay, that change was normal. By the time she passed away, she had lived through 3 wars and still kept her fighting spirits. But acceptance doesn't mean passivity. We still have to act. We still have to make decisions. Accepting uncertainty just starts to give us a bit of room. It starts to give us a little bit of ease. It's when the hard work begins, when we start to let go of the form that we're used to and reorient towards the bigger purpose. It gives us some room to start doing the sifting and sorting. What are we going to bring from the past? What are we going to let go of? What are we going to preserve, reinvent, reimagine? And what are we going to introduce that's completely new? Technology is an example. It starts to give us room to name what's at stake, this change process. We can't hold on to the past, but we can look towards new possibilities. People don't resist change for no reason. We resist change because we're afraid of what we might lose. Accepting the uncertainty starts to put this on the table, puts it out there. I'm afraid I might lose something, but naming it, talking about it, having it be seen, starts to reduce that fear a little bit, starts to move us away from the why change is happening to how do we want it to happen. And this brings us to choice number 2. Liberating choice number 2, to create tomorrow when today is uncertain. And that is choosing values over roles. Roles are important, but they are going to change when there's change, by definition. The roles, the responsibilities are going to shift. But the values are portable. They're within. They're not on the report or in the website, they're inside us. They're what lives inside us, what matters to us. We will have a shared value of care here. It's what the NHS is built on. Examples that have been mentioned today, a kindness, for example. You might have a value of justice, of respect, contribution, curiosity, playfulness, joy. I know the NHS Confederation has a value of boldness. During COVID, it wasn't the system that held it all together, it was the people who had a value of care, who self-organized in community and supported those who were vulnerable until the system could catch up. A good test of values, if you don't know what they are or you want to check in, is what do you do at 9 a.m. on a Monday? It's easy to just do what's urgent or what we've been tasked to do. But taking a moment to check in with ourselves can change the whole day. What actually matters to me today? What matters to what I'm doing today? It doesn't mean you have to change what you do necessarily, although you might drop a couple of things off your to-do list when you realize what you need to prioritize and what you actually need to let go of. But you can keep the same list and bring a different energy to it, show up differently. Maybe you slow down a little, look someone in the eye, give them some room, give yourself some room. It changes your experience of the day when you live from your value, and it changes how people experience you. It changes the impact of what you do. Now you may say, oh, that's all very nice, Amina, but I'm busy. I've got too much to do. Values are more of a luxury when you have stability, you can pay the mortgage, the kids' school fees, you've got the budget. And it's true, we need certainty, we need safety, we need psychological safety, and we need material safety to be able to be our best. Values aren't about ignoring that. They're about giving us a sense of stability when there's pressure. They protect our humanity when the resources aren't ideal, whilst we work towards restoring resources. Values give us meaning in difficult situations, and they sustain our energy. They give us fulfillment when everything around us seems to be meaningless or senseless. In fact, if we go against our values, we experience what some call moral injury and eventually burnout. It doesn't have to be grand gestures. It's the small gestures, the small acts of kindness. And it's important to include ourselves in the values. Your values have to benefit you. Often in a crisis or uncertainty under pressure, kindness or self-kindness is one of the first things to go. Self-care. When in fact, when you're in a crisis or uncertainty, you need more self-kindness and more self-care, not less. So values don't guarantee outcomes, but they guarantee meaning under uncertainty. And they don't replace resources, but they do protect our humanity. Which leads us to liberating choice number 3, a founding value of the NHS, which is solidarity. Choosing solidarity over lone heroism. Now, we can look at human history, we can look at the news, and feel that, wow, humanity is just about war, conflict, greed, hatred, conquest, battles between mighty heroes and mighty villains. But actually, evidence from archaeology, from anthropology, from studying our past, shows that it's the moments and the periods of peace, it's the periods of collaboration, of cooperation across cultures, across divides, across geographies, that mean we have become the most successful species on this planet. Yes, as humans, we're capable of violence, but we're also capable of enormous altruism, sacrificing ourselves for a total stranger. So our survival and our thriving are collective, not individual or led by heroes. And this doesn't mean that you have to light yourself on fire for someone else to be warm. And this isn't sentiment either. This isn't just about being nice to each other. This is being pragmatic, ethically pragmatic. The NHS and the systems of care before it, there was the monasteries that provided care for the sick, for the needy. When they were abolished, they were replaced by the poor laws and the system of workhouses. And then the Public Health Act came in 1848 to centralize things. And eventually, with the welfare state, the NHS emerged. So there's been a process of removing care from individuals, private organizations, to be more collectively organized, which is how we have the NHS today. But those things happen often in response to crises, in response to the plague that wiped out half of the European population, in response to cholera that affected all boroughs in London, not just the poor ones. Infectious diseases and climate change have a way of making us see how interdependent we are. We can't go it alone, and we need each other. Some people talk about the solidarity of the shaken, where a crisis can divide us, or it can make us realize our shared vulnerability and how supporting each other through the mutual care makes us more resilient, not less. And as we come to an end here, I want to also emphasize that this mutual care isn't just psychological. Yes, it's important to give someone space to grieve or to hear what they've been going through, but it's also material. The resources have to follow, whether it's buying a cup of coffee, whether it's sharing a budget, whether it's sharing a building. The resources have to move where they're needed. Doesn't mean we get everything we need, but when we start to see that resources are flowing to where they're needed, not just to where they used to go, we start to feel more trust. And the most difficult resource to share is probably power. Shared decision-making. Sharing power doesn't mean chaos and anarchy. It means responsiveness. It means that resources can go to where they're needed as the uncertain situation changes and moves, and that it moves more quickly. So again, this isn't about big gestures necessarily, it's the small gestures, it's the micro moments that create the social glue between us, the sense of solidarity and resilience. It's smiling at someone you maybe ignore normally. It's inviting someone to speak who's usually silent. Giving credit to someone who's shy. It's those micro moments. So in that spirit, if you'll indulge me, I invite you to turn to a person next to you and say, "It's great that you're here." It's great that you're here. It's great that you're here. And the people online. Okay. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that and that you continue. So in summary, the only constant is change. What doesn't change is our freedom to choose how we respond, how we want to play the game, the finite game and the infinite game. We can choose a pathway of learned anxiety, just responding from our habits, from fear, entrenching ourselves in our positions, and ending up in a disempowered state of exhaustion and burnout. Or we can choose to try liberating choice, choosing to accept uncertainty as normal, choosing to check in with our values, what really matters to us, and acting from them. Choosing solidarity and mutual care when we can just choose separation. And that results in restoring trust, trust in ourselves, others, and the process of change itself. The future isn't a place to get to. It's not a destination you travel to. It's the place we live from by enacting our values, by enacting the care that the NHS is built on. It's what we do moment to moment. So I'll leave you with two questions. One is, what resonated with you from this? Just one thing that maybe reminded you of something you care about that's important to you. And the other is, what will you do differently tomorrow at 9 a.m. as a result? Thank you.